Okay, welcome to the WSGA version 75301 topics. We're going to be discussing, in this webinar, we're going to be discussing advanced NTLM troubleshooting. Some of the key points or highlights for this webinar, we're going to be discussing, we're going to give a description of NTLM, essentially cover what the protocol is and some history behind it. We're going to be discussing the benefits of using NTLM as the authentication method in web filtering environments. We're also going to be talking about specific implementations of NTLM, which ones are supported in WebSense Content Gateway, and with a focus on Active Directory 2008 environments. We're going to deploy NTLM, show you a live demo or a demo, recorded live demo of how to get NTLM working. And we're going to touch on troubleshooting, what to do, what to look for when NTLM isn't working exactly as we expect it to. NTLM is essentially a protocol developed by Microsoft. It's been around for some time. It's a challenge response protocol that basically provides authentication to users. NTLM version 1 is widely deployed for compatibility reasons. It's been around for a long time. It came out when NT came out, when NT first came out. It's also what the WebSense Content Gateway presently uses to authenticate its users. NTLM version 1 is also known as Legacy NTLM. NTLM version 2 came out when NT4 Service Pack 4 came out over 18 years ago. So both of these protocols have been around for quite some time. It's essentially a superior, they upgraded the cipher on NTLM version 1 because they essentially discovered that the crypto on NTLM version 1 was breakable, so they increased the security of the protocol itself. In addition to some other improvements, they added the option to communicate over secure session with NTLM version 2. NTLM typically communicates over SMB or secure SMB if secure session is enabled. The browser uses a function called SPNego to negotiate the authentication method that's going to be used between the server and the client or application that's requesting the authentication. It's going to first authenticate with Kerberos if both the server and the client support it. Otherwise, it's going to use NTLM. When you're using secure SMB, it uses NTLM SSP service all the way through Windows 2003. This service was deprecated in 2008, which causes some specific problems when authenticating via NTLM version 2 in Active Directory 2008 environments. There are 3 workarounds for this issue. We're going to discuss these more in detail later in the webinar. Some of the benefits of NTLM is that first off, the authentication is done off the browser session. So any supported browser, any NTLM supported browser would work independently of the operating system that you're running it on. So it can authenticate on any OS. It works on a Mac if you have a supported browser. A full list of supported browsers is made available in a later slide as well, or you can consult the documentation for the WebSense Content Gateway on our website. Another advantage of NTLM is that it supports thin clients, whether it's terminal servers or Citrix servers. Essentially, since authentication is done at the browser level, we don't care so much about the IP address of the client like some of our other authentication agents or transparent ID agents do. So specifically, it works with terminal server, thin clients, whether it's terminal server or Citrix servers, without the need of adding a Citrix server plugin, for example, or any other transparent identification agent on the server or the client for that matter. NTLM works with transparently or explicitly, whether you're using, if you're running it transparently, whether it's WCCP or it's policy-based routing, it works. It requires some additional configuration that we'll touch more in detail when we do the deployment. So it's slightly different when you do it transparently as opposed to when you do it explicitly. When you do it explicitly via the pack file on the browser or the pack file deployed through GPO, it makes no difference. It works either way. And as I mentioned earlier, there are no additional XID agents required in order for NTLM to work. Okay, here's a handy chart that covers quickly cross-references which NTLM settings are supported in Active Directory 2000, 2003, 2008, and eDirectory. Essentially, NTLM version 1 works well in all four environments. Since the WebSense Content Gateway does not negotiate a security session with the client, we're basically using legacy NTLM or NTLM version 1. It's important that the server does not force session security. So session security requirements or enforcement should be disabled in all cases, regardless of the environment. In Windows 2008, the NTLM SSP service was deprecated. Essentially, that was the service that handled the negotiation between the client and the server for which authentication method was going to be used to authenticate a user. That's done differently. In order for NTLM version 2 to work in Active Directory 2000 environments with the WebSense Content Gateway, there's some additional steps that we need to do, and we'll cover that more in detail in just a few minutes. Finally, all WebSense, all NTLM version 2 issues are corrected in the latest release of WebSense version 7.6, coming out in the second quarter of this year. Okay, to deploy NTLM, there's a few basic steps. The first thing that we should do is verify the LAN manager compatibility level. Next, we're going to verify the minimum session security for the client server. That's done at the server, just to basically verify or ensure that secure sessions are not being forced or required. Next, the following steps, 3 through 9, essentially talk about configuring the WebSense Content Gateway itself. First, we have to enable the NTLM feature on the proxy and then restart. That's going to enable the security module on the WebSense Content Gateway, and from there, we're going to specify which domain controllers we're going to communicate with, which domain controllers the NTLM is going to authenticate against. Next, we can add, or we can specify which IP addresses belong to thin clients, basically, or Citrix servers. If you have thin clients in your environment, any terminal server or Citrix presentation server, the IPs of those servers can be added into the WebSense Content Gateway, basically to specify to the Content Gateway that these are thin clients and not to basically cache their credentials and prompt them individually each time. Next, if you are deploying the WebSense Content Gateway in transparent mode, whether it's WCCP or policy-based routing, we have to configure the redirect hostname section, and that has essentially the IP address of the Content Gateway. We're going to add any NTLM exceptions. Should you have kiosks, for example, or maybe a lab or some servers that you don't want to authenticate against using NTLM, you can add these exceptions in there. Finally, you determine the authentication mode, whether you're going to use IPs, IP authentication mode, or if you're going to use cookie-based authentication mode. Cookie basically keeps a little cookie to track the identity of the user. And finally, you restart the proxy. Here's another chart that essentially covers two sides. One's for the client, and the other side covers the domain controller. It's important to note that Windows 2008 and Vista default to LM compatibility level 3, which essentially send NTLM version 2 responses only. On the client side, it's only going to send NTLM version 2 requests. On the server side, note that it accepts NTLM version 1 requests, no problem, which is important because that's what the WebSense Content Gateway is going to be using. This slide perhaps shows that the relationship between the LM compatibility level 3 a little bit better. To find out the compatibility level for the LAN manager on your server, you can go to HK Local Machine System, Current Control Set, and then Control, and from there you can look at the LM compatibility level, or you can go into the default domain group policy, and under the local policy security options, you can go in there and look at the LAN manager authentication level policy under network security, and it'll tell you exactly what it defaults to. As you can see on the client side, Vista and Windows 7 are going to be able to send NTLM version 2 requests or NTLM version 2 secure session requests to the server. The server accepts LM requests, NTLM version 1 and version 2 requests. Next, we're going to verify the minimum session security. This is in a 2008 environment. You can see that this is done from security settings, local policy, security options. And then from there, you look under the network security session, you find out what the minimum session security is, and you ensure that require NTLM version 2 session security is disabled. For Windows 2008 environments only, it's also important to note that there is an additional step in order to have the domain controller accept legacy requests. As of Active Directory 2008, or as of Windows 2008, the ability for the server to accept LM requests and NTLM version 1 requests has been turned off by default. In order to enable that, you have to go into the registry, follow Microsoft Knowledge Article 957441, so the server basically allows legacy calls. And all the information on how to do that is located in that link included in the slide.